The USS Louisiana is somewhere beneath the Pacific Ocean right now with 155 people sealed inside a steel tube for 90 days straight. They're 800 feet below the surface where sunlight never reaches, moving silently through complete darkness. These aren't prisoners. They're some of America's most elite sailors operating the most powerful weapons platform ever created. And right now, they're sitting down to eat fresh-baked cinnamon rolls. How do you feed 155 people 3 meals a day for 3 months when you can't stop at a grocery store, can't receive deliveries, and you're trapped underwater in a space smaller than most people's houses? The answer is going to blow your mind because what happens in the kitchen of a nuclear submarine is unlike anything else on Earth. Before we dive deep, let me set the scene for you. The USS Louisiana is an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine. It's 560 feet long and cost $4 billion to build. Right now, at this very moment, there are 14 of these submarines operating somewhere in the world's oceans. Nobody except a handful of people in the Pentagon knows exactly where they are. That's by design. Each submarine carries 155 crew members, all men, who live together in the most confined workspace imaginable. We're not talking about a cruise ship here. The entire habitable space inside one of these submarines is roughly the size of a 3-bedroom house. Now imagine cramming 155 people into that space for 3 solid months with no breaks, no shore leave, no fresh air, and no sunlight. Every single one of those 155 people needs to eat 3 meals a day. That's 465 meals daily. Over a 90-day deployment, we're talking about 41,850 individual meals that have to be prepared, served, and cleaned up in a kitchen that's smaller than the average American bedroom. The galley on a nuclear submarine measures approximately 14 feet by 20 feet. That's 280 square feet total. Your average Subway sandwich shop has more space than that. In this tiny area, a team of culinary specialists has to prepare everything from breakfast scrambles to Thanksgiving dinner, from fresh bread to birthday cakes, from simple sandwiches to elaborate holiday feasts. They do this while the submarine is diving, surfacing, making high-speed maneuvers, and maintaining complete silence during critical operations. The stoves can't make noise, the ventilation has to be carefully managed, every piece of equipment has to be shock-mounted because submarines don't cruise smoothly like surface ships. They can change depth rapidly, turn sharply, and occasionally take evasive action that would send unsecured pots and pans flying across the room. Let me tell you about the crew that makes this happen. The culinary specialists aboard submarines are among the best trained food service personnel in any military branch. They don't just learn to cook. They learn to operate under pressure that would break most restaurant chefs. These sailors go through extensive training at the Navy's Culinary Specialist School, where they learn everything from basic food safety to advanced baking techniques. But the real education happens during their first deployment when they learn what it means to feed hungry submariners who've been breathing recycled air and working 18-hour days for weeks on end. The lead culinary specialist on a submarine has a responsibility that goes way beyond cooking. Food is morale. When you're stuck underwater for months with no connection to the outside world except brief radio communications, when you can't see the sun or feel fresh air or take a walk outside, the meals become the highlight of everyone's day. A great meal can boost morale more than almost anything else the Navy can provide. A bad meal can tank morale faster than you'd believe. So how much food does it take to feed 155 people for 90 days? The numbers are absolutely staggering when you break them down. A typical Ohio-class submarine loads approximately 54,000 pounds of food before a deployment. That's 27 tons of groceries. They stock about 2,000 pounds of coffee because submariners run on caffeine. They bring 1,600 pounds of flour for fresh bread and baking. They load 100 pounds of spices and seasonings. They pack 3,000 eggs. They store 2,500 pounds of potatoes. They stock 1,200 pounds of chicken, 800 pounds of beef, 600 pounds of pork, and hundreds of pounds of fish and seafood. They bring 400 gallons of milk in special long-life packaging. They load 500 pounds of fresh vegetables and fruits, though these only last for the first couple weeks before the crew has to switch to canned and frozen options. Here's where it gets really interesting. Every single item of food has to be carefully planned and loaded before the submarine leaves port. There's no running to the store if you forget something. There's no delivery service 800 feet below the ocean surface. If the culinary specialists miscalculate and run out of something critical halfway through the patrol, they're just out of luck. The planning process starts months before deployment. The culinary specialists work with supply officers to create detailed menus for the entire 90-day period. They calculate exactly how much of each ingredient they'll need. They account for special occasions like Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, and halfway night, which is a massive celebration that happens at the midpoint of every deployment. They plan for variety because eating the same meals over and over would destroy morale. They also have to account for waste, spoilage, and the occasional meal that doesn't turn out right and has to be scrapped. Storage is another massive challenge that most people never think about. Where do you put 27 tons of food on a submarine? The answer is everywhere. Submarines use every available cubic foot of space. Food gets stored in dedicated freezers and refrigerators, but those fill up fast. So the crew also stores food in what they call auxiliary spaces. We're talking about food stored under the floor panels in the crew berthing areas. Canned goods stacked in passageways. Boxes of dry goods secured in maintenance spaces. Cases of drinks stored in torpedo rooms. For the first few weeks of deployment, sailors literally walk on food. The deck plates in various compartments sit on top of cases of canned vegetables, boxes of cereal, and bags of flour. As the deployment progresses and the crew eats through the supplies, those storage spaces gradually empty and people actually get more room to move around. The submarine sits slightly higher in the water by the end of patrol simply because they've consumed several tons of food and supplies. Temperature control is critical and way more complicated than you'd think. The freezers and refrigerators aboard submarines have to maintain precise temperatures because food safety is absolutely critical. One case of food poisoning on a submarine could incapacitate dozens of crew members in a confined space with limited medical facilities. The medical corpsmen aboard can handle a lot, but a mass food poisoning incident would be a crisis. The cooling systems have to work perfectly for 3 months straight with no maintenance breaks. If a freezer fails, the crew has to consume all the food in that freezer immediately before it spoils. This has happened before. There are stories of submarines having steak and lobster for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 3 days straight because a freezer went down and they couldn't let thousands of dollars worth of food go to waste. Now let's talk about what actually gets cooked in this impossibly small kitchen every single day. Breakfast starts at 0600 hours and typically runs until 0730. The culinary specialists start working at 0430 to have everything ready. Breakfast might include scrambled eggs made from real eggs or liquid egg product, bacon, sausage, hash browns, pancakes, or French toast, fresh baked biscuits, oatmeal, cold cereal, fresh fruit for the first couple weeks, and, of course, unlimited coffee. Everything is made to order as much as possible. Sailors can request their eggs cooked specific ways. They can get extra bacon. They can have pancakes and eggs and hash browns all at once if they want. The culinary specialists pride themselves on never saying no to reasonable requests. On a submarine, you can't go out to eat. You can't order delivery. This galley is literally the only option for food, so the culinary specialists do everything possible to make people happy. Lunch service runs from 1100 to 1230, and this is usually the lighter meal of the day because most crew members are deep into their work shifts. Lunch might be a soup and sandwich bar with multiple soup options and a variety of sandwich fixings. Or it might be burgers and hot dogs with all the toppings. Sometimes it's a taco bar where crew members can build their own tacos or burritos. The goal is to create something quick and easy that people can grab and eat fast, because submarine operations don't stop for mealtime. If something critical is happening, crew members grab their food and eat at their workstations. Dinner is the main event of every day, and this is where the culinary specialists really show their skills. Dinner service typically runs from 1700 to 1830, and the variety is incredible. One night might be fried chicken with mashed potatoes, gravy, corn on the cob, and dinner rolls. The next night could be lasagna with garlic bread and Caesar salad. Another night brings teriyaki chicken with fried rice and stir-fried vegetables. They rotate through Italian night, Mexican night, Asian night, barbecue night, and traditional American comfort food. Special occasions get even more elaborate. On Thanksgiving, the culinary specialists prepare a full traditional feast with roasted turkey, ham, stuffing, mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, dinner rolls, and multiple dessert options including pumpkin pie, apple pie, and cookies. They do this in that 280-square-foot kitchen while the submarine is potentially conducting operations. The crew dresses in their best uniforms. The officers serve the enlisted sailors, which is a Navy tradition. Everyone eats together, and for a few hours it feels less like living in a steel tube underwater and more like being home with family. Christmas gets similar treatment with prime rib, baked ham, all the traditional sides, and special desserts. The culinary specialists often work for 20 hours straight on these holidays to make everything perfect. Halfway night is another huge celebration. At the exact midpoint of the deployment, the crew throws a massive party to celebrate being halfway done. The culinary specialists go all out with special appetizers, elaborate main courses, and desserts that they've been planning for months. Some submarines have competitions where different divisions compete to create the best food items. The creativity that comes out of these tiny kitchens is absolutely remarkable. Birthday cakes are another tradition that matters more than most people realize. When it's your birthday on a submarine, the culinary specialists bake you a cake. It's usually a simple sheet cake, but it has your name on it and the whole crew sings happy birthday during the meal. This might seem like a small thing, but when you're underwater for your birthday missing your family and friends back home, having your submarine crew acknowledge your special day makes a real difference. The culinary specialists track every crew member's birthday and make sure nobody gets forgotten. Baking on a submarine presents unique challenges that landlocked bakers never face. The atmospheric pressure inside a submarine changes as the boat changes depth. This affects how baked goods rise and cook. Culinary specialists have to adjust their recipes and techniques based on the submarine's depth. A cake that would bake perfectly at sea level might turn out completely wrong at 800 feet below the surface. The ovens themselves are specially designed for submarine use. They're shock-mounted to handle the movement of the boat. They're insulated to reduce heat and odor that could be detected by enemy forces. They're compact but still have to produce enough capacity to bake several trays of cookies or multiple loaves of bread at once. Fresh bread is another morale booster that happens almost daily on submarines. There's something about the smell of fresh baking bread that makes a steel tube full of electronics and weapons feel a little more like home. The culinary specialists bake white bread, wheat bread, dinner rolls, hamburger buns, hot dog buns, and specialty breads. They do this in addition to all the regular meal preparation. The process requires planning because bread takes time to rise and bake. Culinary specialists often start bread dough in the evening so it can rise overnight and be baked fresh for breakfast or lunch the next day. Some submariners swear the bread on submarines is better than anything they can get at home. That's partly because it's genuinely fresh, baked from scratch just hours before eating. But it's also because when you're stuck underwater eating preserved and frozen food most of the time, truly fresh bread tastes absolutely incredible. The mid-rats meal is something most civilians never hear about. Mid-rats is short for midnight rations, and it's essentially a fourth meal served around midnight for crew members working night shifts. Nuclear submarines operate 24 hours a day with no breaks. There's always a full crew on watch keeping the submarine operational and safe. Those sailors working through the night need food, too. Mid-rats is usually simpler than the main meals. It might be leftover dinner items reheated and served buffet style. Or it could be breakfast foods like eggs and bacon. Sometimes it's pizza or sandwiches. The goal is to provide hot, filling food for the crew members who are working while most of the boat sleeps. Culinary specialists rotate through mid-rats duty, so someone is always available to prepare and serve this meal. Now let's talk about the equipment these culinary specialists use to create all this food. The galley equipment on an Ohio-class submarine includes multiple convection ovens that can bake, roast, or reheat large quantities of food. There are griddles for cooking eggs, pancakes, and burgers. There are deep fryers for French fries, chicken, and other fried foods, though these have to be used carefully because hot oil in a confined space that might suddenly tilt or move is dangerous. There are large soup kettles for making soups, stews, and sauces. There are industrial mixers for making bread dough and cake batter. There are slicers for meat and vegetables. There are multiple refrigerators and freezers within easy reach of the cooking area for ingredients that get used frequently. Every piece of equipment has to meet strict Navy specifications. Nothing can create excessive noise because submarines rely on stealth. Nothing can produce strong odors that could be detected by enemy sensors. Everything has to be maintainable with the parts and tools available on board because you can't call a repair technician when you're underwater. Everything has to be safe to operate in a moving, tilting, confined environment. The cleaning and sanitation standards are incredibly strict. The galley has to be spotless at all times. Every surface gets sanitized after every meal. All utensils, pots, pans, and serving equipment get washed and sanitized. The dishwashing area has high-temperature sanitizing capabilities. Food safety inspections happen regularly, and any violations are taken extremely seriously. Remember, one outbreak of foodborne illness could affect a significant portion of the crew in a confined environment. Water usage is another challenge that makes submarine cooking unique. Fresh water on a submarine comes from the nuclear reactor-powered desalination system that converts seawater into drinking water. The system produces plenty of water for all the boat's needs, but submarines still practice water conservation. Dishes get washed efficiently to minimize water use. Culinary specialists learn techniques for rinsing vegetables and preparing food that use less water than conventional methods. Nothing gets wasted. Every drop of water used in the galley has to be accounted for and disposed of properly. The waste management system on a submarine handles everything from food scraps to dishwater, and it all has to work perfectly for the entire deployment. Meal planning takes into account the physical and mental demands on the crew. Submariners work incredibly hard. Watch schedules run 6 hours on, 12 hours off, or even more demanding rotations during critical operations. The work is mentally intense. Operating a nuclear submarine requires constant attention to detail and perfect execution of procedures. Mistakes can be catastrophic. The culinary specialists understand that their job is to provide fuel for these hardworking sailors. Meals need to be high in calories and protein. They need to be satisfying and filling. They also need to provide variety to combat the monotony of submarine life. Eating the same thing over and over would drain morale fast. The culinary specialists also accommodate dietary restrictions and preferences as much as possible. If someone has a food allergy, they make sure there are safe options. If someone doesn't eat certain meats for religious or personal reasons, they provide alternatives. If someone is vegetarian, which is rare on submarines but does happen, they work to ensure that person has adequate options. This level of accommodation requires extra planning and effort in an already challenging environment, but it's considered essential for crew welfare. Nutrition is taken seriously even though this isn't something most people associate with military food. The Navy has nutritionists who help design submarine menus to ensure crew members get balanced nutrition over the course of a deployment. Meals include proteins, carbohydrates, vegetables, fruits when available, and dairy products. The culinary specialists receive guidance on portion sizes and nutritional content. They work to include whole grains, lean proteins, and vegetables in the diet, even though these are sometimes harder to store and prepare than less healthy options. Coffee culture on submarines deserves special mention because submariners consume massive amounts of coffee. The submarine operates 24 hours a day. Crew members work long shifts with intense concentration required. Coffee isn't just a beverage, it's an essential part of submarine operations. The galley keeps multiple pots of coffee brewed at all times. Strong coffee, the kind that would probably violate health codes on shore. Submariners like their coffee thick, dark, and powerful enough to keep them alert through long watches. Some boats have legendary coffee reputations. Sailors who transfer to a new submarine often comment on whether the coffee is better or worse than their previous boat. The culinary specialists take coffee seriously and work to maintain a consistent, strong brew that keeps the crew caffeinated and happy. Dietary supplements become increasingly important as fresh food runs out. For the first 2 to 3 weeks of deployment, the submarine has fresh fruits and vegetables: apples, oranges, lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, onions. The culinary specialists use these fresh items first before they spoil. But after those first few weeks, fresh produce is gone and the crew switches entirely to canned and frozen vegetables and fruits. To compensate for the lack of fresh produce, the Navy provides vitamin supplements, and the culinary specialists incorporate vitamin-rich foods into the menus. Frozen vegetables actually retain most of their nutritional value, and modern freezing techniques mean the quality is pretty good. But everyone notices when the fresh salad bar disappears a few weeks into patrol. The creativity required to maintain variety over 90 days is remarkable. You might think menus would get repetitive, but good culinary specialists pride themselves on innovation. They experiment with different cuisines and cooking techniques. They create fusion dishes combining elements from different traditions. They take basic ingredients and transform them into completely different meals. Ground beef becomes tacos one night, meatballs the next, hamburgers after that, then chili, then meat sauce for pasta. Chicken becomes teriyaki chicken, then fried chicken, then chicken fajitas, then chicken parmesan, then chicken soup. The same basic ingredients get used in dozens of different ways to create the illusion of variety. Submarine culinary specialists also participate in competitions that matter more than you might think. The Navy holds annual culinary competitions where submarine cooks compete against each other. They're judged on food quality, presentation, creativity, and ability to work under pressure. Winning these competitions is a huge point of pride. It brings recognition to the individual culinary specialists and to their submarine. More importantly, it pushes these sailors to constantly improve their skills. The best submarine cooks are genuinely talented chefs who could work in high-end restaurants if they chose that career path instead. Training never stops even during deployment. Senior culinary specialists mentor junior ones, teaching them advanced techniques and sharing knowledge gained from multiple deployments. Junior sailors learn to work efficiently in the cramped space. They learn to anticipate what's needed before being asked. They learn to handle the stress of feeding 155 hungry people on a tight schedule while dealing with equipment problems, supply limitations, and the unique challenges of cooking underwater. This on-the-job training creates specialists who can eventually lead their own galley teams on future deployments. Safety in the submarine galley goes beyond food safety to include physical safety in a hazardous environment. Hot stoves and ovens in a confined space create burn risks. Sharp knives in a moving environment create cut risks. Hot oil in deep fryers becomes dangerous if the submarine makes sudden maneuvers. Heavy pots of boiling water or hot food can cause serious injuries if spilled. The culinary specialists train extensively on safety procedures. They learn to secure everything before the submarine makes planned depth changes or maneuvers. They learn to work carefully and methodically even when rushed. They learn first aid because injuries do happen despite precautions. The relationship between the culinary specialists and the rest of the crew is unique and important. Everyone depends on these sailors for one of the most basic human needs. A good culinary specialist who consistently produces great food becomes one of the most popular people on board. Crew members remember meals from past deployments. They talk about legendary cooks who served on previous patrols. They compare notes about which submarines have the best food. The culinary specialists feel this pressure and take pride in their reputation. Many work extra hours perfecting recipes or preparing special items just to see crew members enjoy their food. The positive feedback and appreciation they receive makes the long hours and difficult conditions worthwhile. Food trading and bartering happens on submarines just like it does in school cafeterias. If someone doesn't like what's being served for a particular meal, they might trade with a shipmate for something different. If someone saved candy or snacks from a previous meal, they might trade those for favors or other items. The culinary specialists sometimes get drawn into this informal economy. A sailor might ask if they can get extra dessert in exchange for helping clean the galley. Another might offer to do someone's laundry in exchange for a late-night sandwich. These informal arrangements help build community and give crew members some sense of control over their environment. The absolute worst thing that can happen in a submarine galley, short of a fire, is running out of coffee. There are legendary stories in the submarine community about boats that miscalculated coffee consumption and ran out weeks before the end of patrol. The impact on morale is immediate and severe. Crew members get irritable, tired, and depressed. Productivity drops. The atmosphere on the boat turns dark. Supply officers who allow coffee to run out become infamous. Culinary specialists watch the coffee supply obsessively and report to the supply officer if consumption is higher than planned. On some submarines, coffee becomes rationed toward the end of patrol to ensure it lasts until the boat returns to port. This rationing is deeply unpopular but necessary. Celebration meals for mission accomplishments happen occasionally, and these are special occasions that break up the routine. If the submarine successfully completes a particularly challenging operation or achieves something significant, the captain might authorize a special meal. The culinary specialists go all out, preparing the best food they can create with available ingredients. These meals serve as rewards and recognition for the crew's hard work. They also create positive memories associated with successful missions. Years later, sailors remember these celebration dinners as highlights of their submarine careers. The impact of food on retention and recruitment shouldn't be underestimated. When submariners finish a deployment and return to port, one of the first things they tell their families and friends about is the food. If the food was consistently good, they share positive stories. If the food was bad, they complain bitterly. Young sailors deciding whether to stay in the Navy and continue submarine service factor in their experiences with galley food. The Navy knows this and invests in culinary training because good food helps retain trained personnel. It's cheaper and more effective to feed sailors well than to constantly recruit and train replacements. The mental health aspects of good food in confined, isolated environments are well documented by Navy psychologists. Humans are social creatures who traditionally gather around meals. On submarines, mealtimes are often the only chance for crew members from different divisions to interact. The galley and mess deck become social hubs where friendships form and crew bonding happens. Sharing a good meal together creates positive associations and builds unit cohesion. The Navy understands this psychological element and encourages commanding officers to prioritize galley operations and ensure culinary specialists have the resources they need. As deployments wind down and submarines head back to port, the food situation changes. Most of the fresh and frozen items are long gone. The crew is eating from cans and shelf-stable supplies. Meals become simpler and less varied. But there's a tradition on many submarines that for the final dinner before pulling into port, the culinary specialists create one last memorable meal using whatever ingredients remain. This final meal celebrates the successful completion of the patrol and gives everyone something to remember. Then the submarine surfaces, pulls into port, and 155 sailors who've been eating submarine food for 3 months immediately head out for their favorite restaurants and home-cooked meals they've been dreaming about. The USS Louisiana and her sister submarines continue operating around the world right now. The culinary specialists continue working in their impossibly small kitchens preparing thousands of meals. They continue baking fresh bread and birthday cakes. They continue finding creative ways to transform limited ingredients into varied and satisfying meals. They continue serving as a crucial element of submarine operations that most people never think about. These sailors in the galley aren't the ones firing weapons or navigating the boat or operating the nuclear reactor. But their contribution to mission success is absolutely critical because hungry sailors can't perform at their best. Well-fed sailors with high morale can accomplish remarkable things. The next time you're in your kitchen at home complaining about having to cook dinner, think about the culinary specialists on submarines cooking for 155 people in a space smaller than your bedroom while 800 feet underwater. Think about them maintaining sanitation standards while the boat tilts and rolls. Think about them baking cakes to celebrate birthdays for people they're stuck with 24 hours a day for months. Think about them working 16-hour days so their shipmates can have hot food and full bellies while operating the most advanced weapon systems ever created. These unsung heroes of submarine service deserve recognition and respect for doing one of the toughest cooking jobs imaginable.